In the 31 years that you chaired the Yale IRB, I assume there were some developments in the way the committee went about its work and so forth. Mm-hmm. Were they driven by changes in the federal rules, or just you developed new best practices about the right way to review research?
They were both. I first became chair in 1969, and that's before there were any federal regulations at all. We had Donald Chalkley's Yellow Book with the Vitruvian Man on the front cover. But these were guidelines. These were not real regulations. We first saw regulations in 1971 when the Food and Drug Administration issued some minimal regulations that covered, among other things, informed consent. And then in 74 we saw the big introduction of a whole body of regulations by what was then called the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And that had a major impact on us. Basically, almost everything in the 74 regulations were things that we were already attentive to, although the ways in which we were attentive were not necessarily in compliance with the letter of the new law. So that had a major impact.
Can you give me an example? What would be something that you were doing that you would not be able to do after the...
Well, it's not so much of not being able to do it. It's a matter of what sort of language are you putting in your consent documents that would parallel the language that was in the federal law regulation. It was not as if we previously did not advise people of the risks, the benefits, the alternatives, but there were certain subtleties in the language that required that we do it in a somewhat different style. I can't recall anything that was a drastic change in our approach to things that came out of the 74 regulation.
How about other changes? Did the committee become more efficient? Did it spend more time on ethical issues? Did it spend more time making sure it was meeting the terms of the regulations?
Well, when we began to get regulations for the special populations, when we received regulations on research involving the fetus in 1975, this had a drastic effect on research that was being done on the fetus and on in vitro fertilization. When we got regulations for research involving prisoners, we had a major phase 1 drug study group at Yale and essentially closed their doors. When we got regulations in 1983 on research involving children, then we have minimal risk, we have, minor increase, vital importance, disorders, all that stuff were new things that we had to cope with. My committee met twice a month on the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. And on months that had a fifth Wednesday in it, we had what we called a policy meeting. And that's where we got together, and if we had collected a set of issues over the time since our last policy meeting, we would say, okay, do we need a policy to address this issue? And we introduced a number of changes in our procedures and practices. One of our most important ones was fairly early on in the 1970s. We introduced a primary reviewer system. The primary reviewer was any member of the committee who the investigator chose to be his or her primary reviewer. And the responsibility of our primary reviewer was to advise, to work as a consultant to the investigator, to say, here's the stuff you got to get in your protocol. if you get it all in there, I can't tell you that your protocol will be approved, but I can tell you it will not be tabled, because the most common reason for tabling a protocol would be the investigator left something out, a segment of information. And with our committee member serving as an advisor, we had no such omissions. And we were very proud of our turnaround time. We usually gave the investigator a final decision within 2 weeks, counting the revisions, back and forth. But if we had to table a protocol, that meant at least a 2-week postponement, which for us was a big deal. And then when the sociologists came in and started studying committees around the country, I found that a 2-week postponement was a drop in the bucket. The other universities were taking months to turn around these protocols. So that was one of our, and we found with the passage of time that far and away the most likely members of our committee to be consulted as primary reviewers were the students. Why? Because the faculty members were busy. They're doing their own research. They're teaching their classes. They're writing grants and so on. The students considered this an enormous opportunity to be invited into the office of a major contributor to research and to get a look at what this individual was thinking about a year before the research even got started. So they saw this as a combination of tutorial for me, advice for you. So they were very diligent, and the faculty quickly learned that these are our best primary reviewers.